Hello, everyone. I'm Zoe. When I was a baby, my mom left me outside of a hospital. I never saw my biological parents after that. I got adopted when I was 2 years old. My new parents were amazing. They never made me feel like I was adopted. They made sure I had a wonderful childhood. But when I was 14, we all got into a terrible car accident on our way to go camping. I was the only one who survived. My life suddenly turned upside down. I had to move to a group home. Most of the other kids there were around my age. Children usually get adopted at a younger age. Of course, that makes sense. Who wants to adopt a teenager? Adoptive parents generally prefer younger children so they can raise them however they want. I was there for almost a year. One morning, I was told the director wanted to see me. When I walked into his office, I saw that he was there with a woman. She stood up abruptly when she saw me. She stared at me. She seemed surprised. Without taking her eyes off me, she said, "Mr. Brown, let's proceed with the adoption." That's when I realized this was an adoption meeting. My legs started shaking. She said, "Welcome to our family. I can't wait for you to start calling me Mom," and gave me a hug. Even though I was really excited, something about her seemed off. She was supposed to come pick me up the next day. I was waiting in the front yard with my friends. I was watching the street. All of a sudden, we heard a loud noise coming from above. We looked up and saw a helicopter. I've never seen one so close. We watched as it landed on an empty lot next to our building. Then someone got out and started running towards us. I couldn't believe my eyes when I realized that it was my new mother. In the next couple of days, I would find out that I was adopted by a billionaire family who got around the city in a helicopter and traveled elsewhere in their private jet. But because I didn't know this at the time, being picked up in a helicopter was a huge surprise. After a 30-minute flight, we arrived at a huge mansion in the middle with various small buildings around it. A luxury car came to get me and took me to one of those small buildings. When I walked in, a woman in a maid's costume welcomed me. She was staring at my face in shock. She looked paralyzed. When I blurted out, "Is this where I'll be staying?" she collected herself. She said, "I'll show you to your room, ma'am." I followed her. She left me in the room for a few hours before coming back. "Miss Abby is waiting for you." Was Abby my new mother's name? I didn't even know. It wasn't. It turned out Miss Abby was in charge of my education. She looked super strict. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a class schedule. Appearance class from 9 to 11 a.m. Speaking class from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Behavior class from 2 to 4 p.m. She realized I had no idea what was going on and said, "These are your special preparatory classes. You'll be able to join the family once you complete this program." When she said, "We also request that you go by the name Nicole instead of Zoe," I was taken aback. "Why?" I asked. In a formal tone, she said, "This is yet another condition you must fulfill in order to join the family." I didn't quite get what was happening, but I didn't like the sound of this. And I didn't even know that this was only the beginning. The next morning, the first class was appearance. There was a hairdresser. The guy cut my hair down to my shoulders. Then he dyed it light brown. When the hairdresser left, Miss Abby said, "Nicole, from now on, this will be your hairstyle. You will measure the length every morning. Once it grows an extra inch, you will call the hairdresser. He will come and cut it to the required length." This was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, but I didn't want to cause any trouble on my first day, so I kept quiet. The next class was speaking. Miss Abby gave me a handout. There were many words on it. "Nicole, memorize all these words. We want you to start using them more frequently in your desk," she snapped. The third class was behavior. I learned a bunch of nonsense there as well. For example, I wasn't supposed to get up before 10 a.m., but I actually like waking up early. Even if I were to wake up early, I had to stay in bed until 10. There was another absurd rule about crying. When Miss Abby said, "You will not cry under any circumstances," I replied, "Well, I can't promise that. A person has a right to cry if they feel like it. You can't forbid it." Miss Abby frowned and said, "This is very important. You are not to cry even when you're alone." My studies went on like this for several days. I ended up focusing on the classes because honestly, there was nothing else for me to do. Miss Abby taught me a million weird things. For example, if my new father talked about work at dinner, I would have to roll my eyes and say, "Daddy, come on." I had to listen to music while I was showering, and of course, there was a list of songs I could choose from. I didn't know why, but I wasn't allowed to listen to music outside of the shower. One day at the end of class, Miss Abby said, "Nicole, I want to thank you for the effort you put into this. You have successfully completed your studies. Tomorrow you will move into your room at the main residence and live there from now on. Take this notebook. It has everything that you need to know. If you deviate from the rules, you'll move back here and we'll start studying from scratch. I was so happy to find out these classes were finally over. I'd begun thinking that this weird program would go on forever. Can you tell me why I learned all this? I asked. With her usual stern expression, Miss Abby said, "You will find out soon enough." The next day, they took me to the mansion. My new room was massive and decorated in pink. I opened the closet. It was full of clothes that were mentioned in class. Was this place prepared for me? I looked around carefully. I went through everything. In the end, I figured out this room belonged to someone else, but for some reason, I had inherited it. After a while, a maid showed up. "Miss Nicole, your mother and father are expecting you at the White Hall," she said. I followed her. At the same time, I was going through the things I'd learned so that I wouldn't make a mistake. Everything in the White Hall was white. When I walked in, my new mom and dad stood up. My dad was looking at me as if he was under a spell. Then he gave me a hug and started sobbing. At the same time, he was saying, "Nicole, my sweet girl, my little daffodil, you see, we're together again." Then my mom hugged me. I was trying to understand what was happening. What did my new dad mean when he said, "You see, we're together again"? Just then I noticed a giant painting on the wall. It was a portrait of a girl in a white dress, just as the room called for. She looked so much like me that at first glance I thought they had commissioned a portrait of me, but of course, it wasn't me. I turned to my new mom. I asked, "Who is this?" "It's you, darling. It's your portrait. It's been hanging there for a year. Who else could it be?" she answered. I didn't understand. I looked at my new dad. "Nicole, do you want to go horse riding tomorrow morning? I missed riding with you," he said. The atmosphere in the room was so weird. I could sense that I had to do something, but I had no idea what to do. What did this all mean? Why were they acting like I had always lived in this house? I started to cry. My new mom said, "Nicole, why are you crying? Didn't Miss Abby teach you that you're not supposed to cry? You never cry." And hearing this, I began to cry even harder. "My name is not Nicole. My name is Zoe, and I'm a crier. I might even be the biggest crybaby in the world. I cry at everything. I don't understand what you're trying to do, but I'm not Nicole. I'm Zoe," I said. My new mom grabbed my arm. "Your name is Nicole. You might have been someone else in the past, but from now on, you are Nicole. Tomorrow, you're resuming your studies with Miss Abby. It looks like the program wasn't quite enough for you," she screamed. I looked at my new dad. He was crying, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the painting. Then he turned to my new mom. "Leave her alone. She's not Nicole. She's not our daughter. Nicole is dead. No one can replace her. We can't bring our daughter back. You can't